Imagine devoting your whole life to raising 7 children alone, only to end up abandoned in a care facility, forgotten after they took everything you had. This isn't just a story, it's a real journey of pain, betrayal, forgiveness, and redemption that will make you rethink what family truly means. I want you to imagine something with me. Picture an old man sitting in the corner of a small care facility room. His back is slightly hunched, his hair mostly white, and his eyes look out the window as if searching for something he lost long ago. There's a faded photograph on the table beside him, a picture of his younger self with 7 children smiling around him. The frame is cracked, the colors worn, but the story behind it is still alive, burning quietly inside his heart. That old man is me, and this is my story. I didn't end up in this facility by accident. My journey here was paved by sacrifices, choices, and above all, the family I once believed would never leave my side. You see, I raised 7 children alone. Their mother, my beloved wife, passed away far too early, leaving me with both the gift and the burden of fatherhood, multiplied by 7. I had nothing but my 2 hands, my determination, and a heart that refused to let them down. Back then, life was not easy. I worked 3 jobs, sometimes more. In the mornings, I would be a construction worker, lifting heavy bricks under the burning Sunday at night. I took shifts as a janitor in an office building where people hardly noticed I existed. On weekends, I fixed bicycles, mended fences, anything that could bring in a little money. Every coin went into keeping those kids fed, clothed, and safe. I wore the same shoes until the soles were nearly gone, patched up my old jackets again and again, but I never let my children go hungry. And I loved them. Oh, how I loved them. I didn't just provide. I tried to be present. I was the one who clapped the loudest at their school plays, the one who taught them how to ride bicycles, the one who stayed awake through the night when they were sick, wiping their foreheads with a damp cloth, whispering prayers into the silence. Each birthday, no matter how broke we were, I found a way to bake a cake, even if it was small and plain. I wanted them to feel celebrated, to feel loved. But as the years went by, something strange happened. My sacrifices became invisible. My love became background noise. My children grew older, and in their eyes, I became just Dad, the man who was always there, the man who didn't need thanks because he was expected to be strong, unshakable, unbreakable. They chased their own dreams, which was natural, but in the chase, they began to forget the one who had carried them on his back for so long. I never complained. I told myself, this is what being a father means. You give, you don't expect anything in return. But deep down, I hoped that one day, when my hair turned grey and my strength began to fade, they would be there for me. That when the time came for me to lean on someone, they would extend the same hands I once held so tightly. But that day never came. Instead, what I received was betrayal in the quietest, yet most painful way. When I reached retirement, I thought it was time to finally rest, to maybe even spend a little time with my children and grandchildren. My retirement benefits, the small reward for a lifetime of labor, were supposed to keep me afloat. But before I knew it, my own children had convinced me to hand it over, telling me they would manage it better, invest it, secure my future. Trusting them, I did. After all, these were my children. If I couldn't trust them, who could I trust? But once the money was gone, so were they. One by one, they drifted away, each with excuses too polished to believe, yet too painful to challenge. Visits became rare, calls even rarer, until silence became the loudest sound in my life. And then, finally, I was brought here to this care facility. Not with love, not with honor, but as if I were a burden too heavy for their lives. Do you know what it feels like to be left behind by the very people you gave everything for? It's not just sadness, it's a hollowing, It's like walking through a house you built with your own hands, only to find it empty, abandoned, as though your presence never mattered. I sat here day after day, staring at the same walls, listening to the laughter of other families visiting their elders, wondering if my children even remembered my face. At night, the memories haunted me. I would see my wife's face, hear her voice reminding me, "Take care of them no matter what." I kept that promise. I took care of them, even when it cost me everything. But I never imagined they would forget so easily. I never imagined love could fade so quickly. And yet, in the midst of that loneliness, something unexpected happened. I discovered a new voice, not just for myself, but for countless others who shared my pain. It started small, almost accidental. A nurse here suggested that I try talking about my story on the internet, maybe even start a YouTube channel. At first, I laughed. What business did an old man like me have online, in a world of young creators, gamers, and influencers? But she insisted. "Your story matters," she said. "There are people out there who need to hear it." So, hesitantly, I tried. I sat in front of a borrowed camera, my hands shaking, my voice uncertain, and I began to speak. I told the truth, the raw, unpolished truth of being a father who gave everything and ended up forgotten. I didn't expect anyone to watch. But people did. Hundreds, then thousands. They wrote comments like, "This is my dad's story too," or, "I needed to hear this before it was too late." Some said my words made them pick up the phone and call their fathers after years of silence. Others confessed they wept, realizing how much they had taken their parents for granted. That was the moment I realized my niche. I wasn't here to entertain, to chase trends, to become a celebrity. My niche was storytelling. My niche was truth. My niche was the voice of forgotten parents, of silent sacrifices, of love that refuses to die even when it's abandoned. And slowly, this channel became more than just a pastime. It became a lifeline. Every video I made pulled me out of despair, reminding me that even if my own children had turned away, there were still hearts in the world that listened, that cared, that needed these words. I was no longer just an old man in a care facility. I had become something else, something unexpected. I had become a storyteller for families everywhere. And that, my friends, is only the beginning. Because what happened next, the way strangers became family, the way my voice reached places I never dreamed, the way even my children began to hear me again, proved that even in the darkest chapters, a story isn't over until love has the last word. When I first entered this care facility, I carried more than just a bag of clothes and a few personal items. I carried the weight of promises I had made long ago, promises whispered to my wife as she lay on her deathbed, promises I made to myself when I first held my children in my arms. Each of those promises felt like bricks stacked upon my shoulders, heavy but meaningful. And even though life turned out differently from what I had imagined, I still clung to them, because they were the last pieces of dignity I had left. You know, people often say that time heals all wounds, but when it comes to abandonment, time doesn't heal, it reminds. Every hour of silence, every day without a visit, every week without a phone call, it's like a wound being reopened. The pain doesn't fade, it settles into your bones, becoming a part of who you are. At first, I tried to excuse my children. I told myself they were busy. They had jobs, families, responsibilities. Maybe they didn't have time to visit me. Maybe they thought I would understand. But as weeks turned into months, I realized it wasn't just busyness, it was distance. A wall that had grown between us, built brick by brick out of neglect, indifference, and selfishness. Sometimes I replay the last conversation I had with my eldest son before I was brought here. He looked at me with eyes that used to be filled with respect but now held only impatience. "Dad," he said, "you'll be more comfortable in the facility. They'll take care of you better than we can, better than they can." Those words echo in my mind, because what he really meant was, "We don't want the burden." And the truth is, they didn't even try. They didn't ask what I wanted. They didn't consider my feelings. They just decided. And I, an old man, tired and weary, had no strength left to argue. I remember sitting in the back seat of the car as they drove me here. None of my children spoke. The radio played faintly, some upbeat song that clashed with the heaviness in my chest. I stared out the window at the passing streets, the neighborhoods where I once walked them to school, the grocery store where I used to buy their favorite snacks. Every corner held a memory, a piece of my life, and with each turn of the wheel, it felt like those memories were being erased, replaced by silence. When we arrived, they didn't even come inside with me. They left me at the entrance, handed over my paperwork, and drove away. No hugs, no lingering goodbyes, just gone. And that was the moment I realized something profound. Family is not just about blood. Family is about presence. It's about who stays, not who leaves. The staff here at the facility were kind, but kindness from strangers feels different. It's appreciated, but it doesn't fill the same void. They call me Mr. Johnson. They help me with meals. They check my health. But they don't know the stories behind my scars. They don't know the weight of promises I carry. They don't know the names of my children or the dreams I once had for them. But the loneliness, as crushing as it was, became the soil where something new grew. Because when I started telling my story online, it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about everyone who had ever felt forgotten. Every word I spoke became a mirror for others to see their own reflections. People started sharing their stories in the comments, stories of fathers who worked until their hands bled, of mothers who sacrificed everything only to be left behind. And slowly, I realized something else. I was not alone. Do you know how powerful that realization is? To go from feeling like the last voice in an empty room to hearing echoes of others who understand, who nod their heads in agreement, who weep with you through a screen. It's like finding a family again, not the one you gave birth to, but the one that chooses to stand with you in spirit. I still remember one comment that stopped me cold. It was from a young man who wrote, "I haven't spoken to my dad in 5 years, but after hearing your story, I called him today. He cried when he heard my voice." That single comment made all the pain worth it. Because if my suffering could bridge the gap between even one father and one child, then maybe it had a purpose. And that's when I realized my story was not just mine. It was a message, a reminder, a wake-up call. Parents are not eternal. We don't stay young forever. One day, the strong hands that carried you will tremble. One day, the voice that scolded you will soften. One day, the eyes that watched over you will close. And if you wait too long to appreciate them, you may find yourself standing at a grave, wishing you had one more chance. So I kept speaking. I kept telling my truth. And the channel grew. People began calling it a niche, a category of content that reached directly into the hearts of families. But for me, it wasn't strategy. It wasn't about views or subscribers. It was survival. It was healing. It was turning my pain into something that could maybe, just maybe, prevent others from experiencing the same fate. And while strangers listened, my own children remained silent. There were nights when I lay in bed, the glow of my phone lighting up my face as I read comment after comment, tears streaming down my cheeks. Hundreds of people cared, thousands even, but not the 7 who mattered most. My phone never buzzed with their names. My door never opened to their visits. The silence was deafening, and yet I kept going. Because sometimes, when your own family doesn't see your worth, you have to create a new purpose for yourself. Sometimes you have to build a new kind of family, not of blood, but of connection, of shared pain, of shared hope. This is what storytelling gave me. A lifeline, a way to turn betrayal into something meaningful, a way to ensure that my voice would not disappear into silence, even if my children never heard it again. But little did I know, the ripple effect of those stories was about to reach further than I ever imagined. And eventually, even into the lives of the very children who had left me behind. Because life has a strange way of bringing truth to light, and no matter how far you run, no matter how deeply you try to bury the past, truth has a way of finding its way home. There's a peculiar kind of silence that lives in care facilities. It's not the peaceful silence you find in a library or the calming silence of a forest. No, this silence is heavy, almost suffocating. It's the silence of waiting. Waiting for visitors who may never come, waiting for calls that may never arrive, waiting for the next meal, the next medication, the next small reminder that time is still moving, even when life feels stuck. In the evenings, when the hallways are dimly lit and the nurses walk quietly from room to room, that silence presses down hardest. I often sit by the window, staring out at the parking lot, watching cars pull in and out. Sometimes families arrive, sons, daughters, grandchildren, carrying flowers, balloons, or just open arms. I watch as their elders light up with joy, their tired faces glowing with the warmth of recognition. Those are beautiful moments. But for me, they are also daggers, because my parking lot remains empty. My children's cars never turn into this driveway. It's strange how the mind works in those moments. You start to question everything. Did I do enough? Was I too harsh when they were little? Did I fail them in some invisible way? Or worse, was my love so ordinary that they simply forgot it once they no longer needed it? These questions haunt me, circling my thoughts like vultures, never landing but never leaving either. And yet, even in this silence, memories keep me company. I remember the laughter of my children when they were young, the way they used to run into my arms when I came home from work, sweaty and exhausted, but still, their hero. I remember sitting at the dinner table, telling stories that made them giggle until milk spilled out of their noses. I remember Christmas mornings when I wrapped second-hand toys to make them look brand new, just to see the sparkle in their eyes. Those memories are treasures, but they are also reminders of how far we've drifted. It's as if I'm living in two worlds at once, the past where love was alive and the present where love is absent. And sometimes the gap between those two worlds feels impossible to cross. But then came the turning point, the day I recorded my first long story for YouTube. It was unplanned. The nurse had left her small camera on my bedside table, encouraging me to just try. I stared at that lens for a long time, unsure what to say. Then, without thinking, I began to speak. At first, my words were shaky. My throat tightened. My eyes welled up. I talked about raising 7 kids alone, about losing my wife too soon, about the struggles of working endless jobs just to put food on the table. I talked about the joy of watching my children grow and the heartbreak of watching them leave. And then I spoke about this room, this silence, this feeling of being forgotten. When I finished, I didn't know if I had said too much or too little. I didn't even know if anyone would watch, but I uploaded it anyway, more as an act of release than expectation. It felt like shouting into the void. But the void answered back. Within days, the video began to spread. Not viral in the flashy celebrity sense, but viral in the quiet, human way, shared from one heart to another. Comments began pouring in. Some people wrote paragraphs, others just a single sentence, but every word felt like a thread pulling me out of isolation. One woman wrote, "Your story is my father's story. I ignored his calls too many times. I'm calling him right now. Thank you for reminding me." Another said, "I lost my dad last year. Listening to you makes me feel like he's still here, teaching me through your pain. Do you know what that does to a man who thought he was invisible? It makes him visible again. It turns the silence into something bearable, even meaningful." I found myself recording more stories. Not scripted, not polished, just me talking. The way I would talk to a friend. I spoke about the lessons I learned as a father, the mistakes I made, the sacrifices that no one saw. I spoke about forgiveness, about resilience, about the strange beauty of love that keeps giving even when it is not returned. And people listened, thousands of them. That's when I realized something vital. This was my niche, not the kind of niche that marketers talk about, where you calculate demographics and optimize keywords. No, this was a soul niche, a place where my truth intersected with the needs of others. People weren't just watching for entertainment. They were watching for healing, for reminders, for a voice that said, "You are not alone in your story." And with every video, I felt lighter. Not because my children came back, they didn't, not yet, but because I began to understand that sometimes the love you pour out into the world doesn't come back from where you expect. Sometimes it comes from strangers who become family in ways blood never could. One night, as I scrolled through the comments, I stumbled upon one that made me pause. It read, "Sir, I don't know you, but I love you. You remind me of the grandfather I never had. Thank you for sharing your heart. Don't have seduns. To the surf feed it." I sat there, tears streaming down my face, holding the phone against my chest. Because in that moment, I realized something extraordinary. I had been searching for love in the wrong places. My children may have forgotten me, but the world had not. My voice, my pain, my truth, it mattered. And slowly, the empty corners of my heart began to fill again. Not completely. The ache of my children's absence remained. But the loneliness wasn't as suffocating anymore. Because now, I had purpose. I had connection. I had a new kind of family, the family of listeners, of viewers, of people who saw me not as a burden, but as a voice worth hearing. And that gave me strength. Strength to wake up each day. Strength to sit in front of the camera and tell another story. Strength to keep believing that maybe, just maybe, my words would one day reach the ears of the 7 who mattered most. Because deep down, no matter how far they drifted, no matter how silent they remained, I still loved them. I still wanted them to hear me. I still believed that love, though forgotten, could be remembered again. And as fate would have it, the very stories I thought were for strangers would eventually find their way back home, back to the children who had left me behind. But before that happened, something even greater unfolded. Something that proved to me that when you share your truth, the world has a way of answering back in ways you never imagined. It's a strange thing, isn't it? How a single story can travel farther than footsteps, farther than phone calls, even farther than blood ties. When I first sat down to share my story with the world, I never imagined it would ripple outward like a stone dropped in water. I thought maybe a handful of people would listen, nod, and move on. But that's the beauty and the mystery of truth. When it's spoken from the heart, it doesn't just stay still, it moves, it grows, it connects. Soon, my quiet little videos began showing up in places I never dreamed of. I'd receive messages from people across oceans, from different cultures, different languages, all saying the same thing: your story is my story. Fathers in India, grandmothers in Mexico, young men in Europe who regretted pushing their parents away, they all found a piece of themselves in my voice. And with every comment, with every message, I felt less like a forgotten old man and more like a bridge connecting hearts that thought they were alone in their pain. But the ripple effect went deeper than that. Something remarkable began to happen. People weren't just listening, they were acting. One woman wrote, "I drove 3 hours today just to surprise my mother. I hadn't visited her in years. After hearing your words, I couldn't wait another day." A young father confessed, "I've been so focused on my career that I forgot to spend time with my kids. Hearing your story made me realize I don't want them to ever feel the way you do. I'm taking the weekend off just to be with them." Even teenagers, kids who usually scroll past anything too serious, left comments like, "I never thought about how my parents feel. I hugged my dad for the first time in months today. He was so surprised. Do you see what was happening? My loneliness was transforming into love not just for me, but for families everywhere. My pain became a mirror that helped others see what they were about to lose if they didn't change. And that, to me, was nothing short of a miracle. Still, late at night, when the lights were off and the world grew quiet, the ache for my own children remained. No amount of strangers' love could erase that. I longed to hear their voices, to see their faces, to know that the bond we once shared hadn't been completely severed. I wondered if they had stumbled across my videos. Did they recognize my voice, my hands, my eyes? Did they feel guilt? Or did they just scroll past, pretending I was someone else's father, not theirs? The truth is, I didn't know, and maybe that uncertainty was the hardest part. But life has a way of surprising us, because while I was pouring my heart out to strangers, my words were indeed making their way back to my children, one by one. I didn't know it at first, but my youngest daughter was the first to find my channel. She had been scrolling through YouTube late one night when my face appeared on her screen. At first, she thought it was just some random old man telling stories. But then she heard my voice, the same voice that once sang her lullabies, that once told her bedtime stories about brave heroes and kind queens, and suddenly, she knew. It was me. She didn't comment, she didn't call, she just watched. Quietly, secretly, video after video. And though she never reached out, something inside her began to shift. She saw not just her father, but the man behind the title. The man who sacrificed, who hurt, who still loved. Weeks later, my eldest son stumbled across my channel too. Someone he worked with had shared one of my videos on social media, not knowing who I really was. He clicked out of curiosity, and there I was, his father, raw and unfiltered, speaking truths he had long buried. He told me much later that he couldn't finish the video the first time. The guilt was too heavy. He closed it, tried to forget. But the words wouldn't leave him. So he returned, again and again, and slowly. The ripple effect wasn't just reaching strangers, it was reaching home. But at the time, I didn't know any of this. All I knew was that my channel was growing, my inbox filled with messages, my comment section overflowed with gratitude, and my heart began to believe that maybe I still had a purpose left in this world. The staff at the facility noticed the change in me. The nurse who had first suggested I share my story often stopped by my room, smiling as she said, "You look brighter these days, Mr. Johnson." And she was right. For the first time in years, I felt alive again, not because my circumstances had changed, but because my voice mattered. One afternoon, as I prepared to record another video, I looked into the camera and asked a simple question. When was the last time you told your parents you loved them? The response was overwhelming. Thousands of comments poured in. Some admitted it had been years. Some proudly shared that they had just done it. Others confessed through tears that it was already too late, their parents were gone, and they would give anything for one more chance. That video became one of my most shared, not because it was fancy or professional, but because it was real, and that's when I realized the true power of this niche. Storytelling wasn't just entertainment, it was transformation. It was a wake-up call. It was a reminder of the things we often take for granted until they're gone. And slowly, my heart began to heal. Not completely, but enough to keep going, enough to keep hoping. Because somewhere deep inside, I still believed my children would come back. I didn't know when, I didn't know how, but I believed that love, though buried under layers of neglect and distance, was still alive somewhere in their hearts. And as the ripple of my voice spread farther and farther, life was preparing to show me just how powerful that belief could be. I never thought I would find myself surrounded by people who knew me only through a screen, yet cared for me as if we had shared a lifetime together. That's the strangest part of this whole journey, how strangers, people I had never met in person, began to feel closer than my own blood. The channel grew faster than I could have ever imagined. Every day, new subscribers joined, not for entertainment, not for flashy content, but because the stories spoke to something deep inside them. They weren't just watching, they were connecting. And in that connection, I discovered something I thought I had lost forever, a sense of belonging. I remember one afternoon, the nurse came rushing into my room with her tablet in hand. She was smiling so wide her cheeks were flushed. "Mr. Johnson," she said, "do you realize how many people watched your last video?" I shrugged, not really sure what she meant. "Over 1 million views," she announced, eyes sparkling with excitement. 1 million! I sat back in my chair, stunned. I wasn't sure what to make of it. Me, an old man sitting in a small care facility room, had reached more people than I had ever met in my entire life. My voice, once ignored by my own children, was now being heard around the world. But it wasn't the numbers that mattered, it was the letters. Yes, the letters. People began sending me handwritten notes, packages, and little gifts. They found the address of the care facility. And soon, my room filled with envelopes from every corner of the globe. Some were written on fancy stationery, others on torn notebook paper, but each one carried the same message. "Thank you. You made me see my family differently." One letter came from a young man in South Africa. He wrote, "My father worked in the mines. I never respected him for the sacrifices he made, and when he passed away, I didn't even cry. After hearing your stories, I finally understood. I visit his grave every week now. I talk to him. I tell him I'm sorry." Another came from a single mother in Canada. She said, "I show your videos to my kids so they understand what love and sacrifice look like. You are teaching them lessons I can't always put into words." Each letter was like a patch, slowly mending the torn fabric of my heart. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. I felt heard. I felt loved. But the most surprising thing was how these strangers began to treat me as if I were their own father, their own grandfather. They called me Papa Johnson, Grandpa, Dad. They sent me pictures of their families, updates about their lives, as if I were part of their story now. And in many ways, I was. Do you know what that feels like? To be adopted by the world after being abandoned by your own? It's humbling, it's overwhelming, and it's healing. Still, deep down, there was a part of me that longed for reconciliation with my children. The letters and messages filled me with joy, but the silence from my own 7 children was still a shadow that lingered. I wondered if they had seen the comments, if they had heard strangers calling me Dad with more affection than they had shown me in years. Did it sting them? Did it awaken something inside them? Or did they just scroll past, pretending it didn't matter? I didn't know. And maybe that uncertainty was what hurt the most. But then something unexpected happened. One evening, as I was reading through the mountain of letters, the nurse knocked on my door with a smile. "Mr. Johnson," she said, "you have a visitor." My heart skipped. A visitor? For me, that was rare. Most of the time, the visitors who came into this building weren't here for me, they were here for others. I stood slowly, my hands trembling, and walked toward the lobby. And there, standing nervously with a bouquet of flowers in her hands, was a young woman I had never seen before. She looked up, her eyes glistening, and whispered, "Dad." For a moment I froze. My mind raced, my heart pounded. She wasn't my daughter, at least not by blood. But she explained through tears that she had lost her father when she was a teenager, and ever since discovering my channel, she felt as though she had him back. "You don't know me," she said, "but you've been like a father to me, and I couldn't let another day go by without telling you in person." I broke down. I hugged her as if she were my own flesh and blood, and in that embrace, something shifted inside me. Family isn't just about who you raise, it's about who chooses to love you, who chooses to show up. That visit became the first of many. Slowly, people began to come. Some drove hours, even days, just to sit with me for a few minutes. They brought me meals, gifts, letters, and above all, love. The staff at the facility were amazed. "Mr. Johnson, you're the most popular resident we've ever had," they teased. But I didn't care about popularity. I cared about connection. And as these strangers became family, I realized something powerful. Maybe my story wasn't meant to end with sorrow. Maybe it was meant to end with hope, because every word I spoke, every tear I shed, every truth I shared, it wasn't wasted. It was building something, a legacy, not of wealth or inheritance, but of love, of honesty, of connection. And though my 7 children were still absent, still silent, I began to feel a sense of peace, because I knew, deep in my soul, that love had not left me. Love had simply found me in a different form. But life, as always, had more in store. Because while strangers were becoming family, my real family, my 7 children, were closer to hearing my voice than I realized. And soon, the silence that had separated us for so long would begin to break. For months, I lived in that strange tension between joy and sorrow. On one side, I had this growing community, millions of strangers who had become closer than family. On the other, there was the silence, heavy and suffocating, from the 7 people I had once devoted every heartbeat of my life to, my children. Every night, before I closed my eyes, I would whisper a prayer, not for more subscribers, not for more letters, but for one simple thing, that one of my children would remember me, reach out, or at the very least, whisper my name in love, even if I couldn't hear it. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and the silence remained. But life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. It started with a comment. I was scrolling through the hundreds of messages that poured into my latest video when one stood out. It didn't have a username like Loving Daughter 89 or Grateful Son 23. No, it was just a plain name. My son's name. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. The internet is full of people who share the same names. But then I read the words, and my heart nearly stopped. Dad, it's me. I don't know if you'll believe this, but I've been watching your videos in secret. I don't know why I'm writing this here. Maybe because I don't have the courage to call. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. I must have read those lines 100 times. My hands shook, my chest tightened, tears blurred my vision. Was it real? Could it truly be him? After all this time, after all the silence, was my son finally reaching out? The nurse found me sitting there, staring at the screen, my face wet with tears. She gently placed a hand on my shoulder. Mr. Johnson, are you okay? I laughed through the sobs. Okay, I think my son just spoke to me. That comment became a spark. Over the next few weeks, more familiar names began appearing in the comment sections. Not all at once, and not always with warmth, but they were there. One child wrote, Dad, I don't know if I'm ready to forgive or forget, but I'm listening. Another said, I didn't realize how much I missed your voice until now. It wasn't reconciliation. Not yet. But it was a beginning. And beginnings, no matter how small, are sacred. Then came the phone call. I was sitting by the window one afternoon, watching the leaves fall from the trees outside, when the nurse walked in holding the cordless phone. Mr. Johnson, she said softly, there's someone on the line for you. My heart raced. Who? I asked, almost afraid of the answer. She smiled gently. Your daughter. The world seemed to stop. I pressed the phone to my ear, my hands trembling. Hello? For a moment, there was only silence. Then, a shaky voice whispered, Dad? I closed my eyes, the word cutting through me like sunlight breaking through clouds. Yes, I whispered back. It's me. She broke down crying, and I did too. For minutes, neither of us could speak. We just let the tears say what words couldn't. When she finally found her voice, she said, I'm sorry. For everything. For not being there. For forgetting you. I didn't realize what we had until I saw what you lost. I swallowed hard. Sweetheart, I said, I don't need apologies. I just need you. That's all I ever wanted. That call lasted over an hour. We talked about her children, about her job, about the regrets that had weighed on her heart. And for the first time in years, I felt like a father again. Word spread quickly among my other children. Some were hesitant, some resistant, but slowly, one by one, they reached out. A message here, a phone call there, even a handwritten letter that arrived in the mail. They weren't grand gestures, but they were steps towards something I had prayed for so long. But with every reunion, there was also pain. Pain in hearing how distant we had become. Pain in realizing how many years had been lost. Pain in acknowledging that no amount of forgiveness could give us back the time stolen by silence. And yet, even in that pain, there was beauty. Because reconciliation isn't about erasing the past, it's about choosing to build something new, even on broken foundations. The moment that struck me most was when my youngest son finally called. He had been the angriest, the most distant of them all. When I answered, there was no hello, no pleasantries, just a deep, heavy sigh, followed by the words, "Dad, do you hate me?" My heart shattered. "Hate you?" I said quickly. "Son, I could never hate you. You are my child. I may have been hurt, I may have been forgotten, but hate? No, never." There was silence on the line, then a quiet sob. "I thought you'd given up on me," he admitted. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Never. I prayed for you every day. I never stopped loving you. Not for a single moment." That broke him. He wept, and I wept with him. And though that call didn't fix everything, it cracked open the door that had been closed for too long. As the weeks went on, more calls came, more messages arrived, and slowly the wall of silence began to crumble. My children weren't all ready to visit, not yet. Some still carried guilt, others fear, but they were reaching out. And that was enough for me, because love, once buried, had begun to surface again. And through it all, I realized something powerful. Sometimes it takes losing everything for people to finally see what truly matters. And sometimes, even in the darkest of endings, there can be a new beginning. But little did I know, the biggest surprise of all was still waiting for me. A moment that would change not only my story, but theirs as well, and prove that love, no matter how broken, always finds a way home. I had dreamed of it so many times, imagined the sound of footsteps echoing down the hallway, the familiar faces I once kissed goodnight, now grown, standing in front of me. But dreams are slippery things. You hold them too tight, and they vanish. You hold them too loose, and they drift away. For years, I held on to the hope that my 7 children would one day come back. That hope kept me breathing on nights when loneliness threatened to crush me. And then one morning, it happened. The nurse walked into my room, her smile wider than I had ever seen it. "Mr. Johnson," she said, "you might want to sit down for this." My heart skipped. "What is it?" I asked, trying to read her face. "You have visitors," she whispered, her eyes glistening. "Not one, not 2, all of them." I froze. My cane nearly slipped from my hand. All of them? Could it be true? After years of silence, regret, half-hearted calls and hesitant messages, all 7 of my children were here? My legs felt weak as I stood. The hallway stretched before me like a road leading back through decades of memories. Each step was heavy, but my heart beat faster with every inch. And then I saw them. 7 figures stood near the entrance of the care facility lobby. They were older, of course, lines carved into their faces, hair touched with grey, but still my babies. My sons, my daughters, all gathered in one place. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Time seemed to fold in on itself, and I was back in our old kitchen, watching them bicker over cereal boxes, or in the backyard, where their laughter filled the air as they chased each other barefoot through the grass. Then, without warning, my eldest daughter dropped the flowers she was holding and ran toward me. Her arms wrapped around my frail body, and she sobbed into my chest. "Dad," she cried, "I'm so sorry. We should have never left you." Her tears soaked my shirt, and my own spilled freely. "You're here," I whispered, my voice cracking. "That's all that matters now. You're here." The others followed, one by one. My second son, who had always been the quiet one, stood before me, his lip trembling. "I didn't know how to face you," he admitted. "I thought I had failed you." I cupped his face in my wrinkled hands. "You could never fail me. You are my son, that is enough." My youngest daughter, the baby of the family, clung to me like she used to when she was small. "I missed you every day, Dad. I just didn't know how to come back." I kissed the top of her head. "And yet, here you are," I said softly. "You found your way." We stood there, a messy circle of tears, hugs, and whispered apologies. The staff, the nurses, even the other residents watched silently, some wiping their own eyes. It wasn't just a reunion, it was a resurrection. A family once broken, breathing again. Later, we sat together in the common room. The 7 of them crowded around me, just like old times, when they would pile onto the couch and fight for space beside me. They brought food, photo albums, little gifts, things they thought might fill the gaps left by years of absence. But the truth was, nothing material could compare to the gift of their presence. We talked for hours. At first, the words stumbled, awkward and hesitant, like strangers trying to find common ground. But slowly, laughter began to slip in, and old stories resurfaced. My eldest son reminded everyone how I once burned dinner trying to follow a recipe. My middle daughter teased her brothers about how I made them wear matching sweaters one Christmas. For a while, it felt like nothing had been lost. For a while, it felt like we had stepped back into a time before bitterness, before distance, before betrayal. But I knew, deep inside, that healing would take time. As the day drew to a close, one of my children asked the question that had been lingering in the air. "Dad," she said gently, "do you hate us for what we did?" The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me, waiting. I took a deep breath. My voice was steady, but my heart ached. "No," I said firmly. "I don't hate you, I never did. I was hurt, yes. I was lonely, yes. But hate, never. You are my children. I carried you in my arms. I worked for you. I sacrificed for you. And even when you forgot me, I never stopped loving you. Not once." Tears welled in their eyes again. My words weren't just forgiveness, they were a bridge, one they could finally walk across. One by one, they promised to do better, to visit often, to call, to be present. I didn't ask for perfection, I only asked for their love. And on that day, for the first time in so many years, I felt it again. When they left that evening, I stood at the doorway of the facility, my cane in one hand, waving as they drove away. My heart was full, my soul lighter than it had been in decades. I knew there would still be challenges ahead. Old wounds don't vanish overnight. But I also knew this. Love had returned to me. And that was enough. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I whispered the same prayer I had whispered for years. But this time, it wasn't a prayer of longing. It was a prayer of gratitude. "Thank you, God. You brought them home. Meredith knows." And with that, I drifted into the most peaceful sleep I had known in a very, very long time. The morning after that reunion felt different from any morning I could remember. For years, I had woken up to silence, to the dull hum of the care facility, to the lonely rhythm of days that bled into one another. But that day, I awoke with a heart that felt lighter, as though a great weight had been lifted from my chest. The air itself seemed brighter, fresher. I could still hear their voices in my head, my children, all 7 of them, calling me Dad again, their laughter echoing through the hallways, their tears soaking into my shirt as they hugged me like they never wanted to let go. For so long, I had feared that memory would be my only connection to them. But now, for the first time in decades, it was real again. Yet, even as joy flooded my soul, I knew the work of rebuilding had only just begun. Relationships don't heal overnight. Trust doesn't repair itself with a single hug. Love is both fragile and strong. It bends, it breaks, but if tended carefully, it grows back. And that was the journey we had stepped into. The first step was communication. Not long after that reunion, my eldest daughter set up a group chat for all of us. A simple little thread on our phones, but it became the lifeline of our healing. Every morning, I would wake up to new messages. Photos of their kids eating breakfast, little updates about work, even silly jokes meant to lighten the mood. At first, I didn't know how to respond. Technology was never my strength. I was more comfortable with paper and pen than with glowing screens. But with the help of the nurses, I learned. And soon, I was sending my own messages, my own little notes of encouragement. "Good luck on your test, sweetheart," I'd write to a granddaughter. "Proud of you for the promotion, son," I'd type, even if it took me 10 minutes to find the right letters. It wasn't perfect. Sometimes messages went unanswered. Sometimes days would pass before anyone wrote. But it was a start. A bridge built brick by brick, one word at a time. Then came the visits. At first, they came one by one. My youngest daughter was the first. She arrived with her children in tow, 2 little ones, who looked up at me with wide, curious eyes. "This is your grandpa," she told them softly. Grandpa. The word struck me like lightning. For years, I had been stripped of that title, denied the chance to hold sticky little hands or listen to innocent giggles. But now, here they were, my grandchildren, flesh and blood, looking at me like I was someone worth knowing. They climbed onto my lap, their tiny fingers tugging at my shirt, their voices filling the air with questions. And for the first time in so long, I felt young again. I wasn't just an old man in a care facility. I was grandpa. I was dad. I was family. Soon, the others followed. My sons brought their families too. Each visit a patch, sewn into the fabric of what had once been torn. We shared meals in the common room, told stories that made the younger ones laugh, and even argued a little, because that's what families do. One moment I will never forget was when my middle son pulled me aside after a visit. He had always been the most stubborn, the one who carried anger like a shield. With tears in his eyes, he whispered, "Dad, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve your forgiveness." In fact, I placed my hand on his shoulder. "Son, forgiveness isn't something you earn. It's something you give, and I've already given it, long before you asked." He broke down then, and we held each other for a long time. The more we met, the more we remembered. Memories that had been buried under years of bitterness began to surface. Christmas mornings, camping trips, late-night talks on the porch. And with those memories came laughter, the kind that shakes the walls and makes strangers smile as they pass by. But it wasn't all easy. There were still moments of tension, still old wounds that stung when touched. Sometimes the conversations grew heavy, filled with unspoken guilt. "Why didn't you call sooner?" one would ask another. "Why didn't we notice Dad was suffering?" And though I wanted to silence those questions, I knew they were part of the healing. We had to face the truth before we could truly move forward. And so, I told them gently, "We can't change the past. We can't erase the years we lost. But we can decide what to do with the time we have left. And I don't want to waste another second." Those words became our anchor. Whenever guilt threatened to pull us under, we reminded ourselves of that truth. We still had time. What surprised me most was how the YouTube channel became part of this healing. My children began watching not as critics, not with embarrassment, but with respect. They saw how strangers had rallied around me, how the stories had touched millions, how people called me Dad when they needed guidance. And slowly, they began to understand. "Dad," my eldest son said one day, "I didn't realize how much wisdom you carried. I took it for granted. I thought I knew everything. But listening to your stories, I see now how much I missed." I smiled, tears brimming in my eyes. It's never too late to listen. Together, we even made a video, me and all 7 of them, sitting side by side in the facility's garden, sharing our story with the world. We spoke about mistakes, about forgiveness, about the beauty of second chances. It wasn't scripted, it wasn't polished, but it was real. And that video became one of the most watched on my channel. People wrote comments like, "This gives me hope for my family," and "If they can heal, maybe we can too." And that's when I realized something profound. Our story wasn't just for us anymore. It was for everyone. Every family broken by silence, every parent forgotten, every child burdened by regret. We weren't just rebuilding for ourselves, we were showing the world that reconciliation is possible, even when it feels too late. As months passed, the visits grew more frequent, the conversations deeper, the love stronger. I began to feel alive in ways I hadn't in years. The loneliness that once haunted me was slowly replaced by the warmth of family. One evening, as we sat together watching the sunset, my youngest granddaughter climbed into my lap and asked, "Grandpa, are you happy now?" I looked around at my children laughing, at my grandchildren chasing each other, at the family I thought I had lost forever, and with tears in my eyes I whispered, "Yes, sweetheart, I'm happier than I ever thought I'd be again." That night, as I lay in bed, I realized something important. Life doesn't give us back the years we lose, but it gives us moments, precious, fleeting moments, that can heal even the deepest wounds if we choose to embrace them. And I chose to embrace them all. Because rebuilding what was lost isn't about starting over. It's about taking the broken pieces, the scars, the regrets, and shaping them into something new, something beautiful, something stronger than before. And together, that's exactly what we were doing. There comes a moment in every person's life when you stop asking, "What can I gain?" and instead start asking, "What will I leave behind?" For me, that moment came late, so late I thought I had missed it. For years, my legacy felt like ashes. I believed I had raised 7 children only to be forgotten, discarded like a worn-out coat left in the back of a closet. But sitting there with them again, surrounded by grandchildren climbing over my knees and children who once turned away now holding my hands, I realized something. My story wasn't over. My legacy wasn't finished. It was being rewritten, piece by piece, with every act of love that returned to me. The first sign of this shift came when my eldest daughter pulled out a notebook during one of our visits. "Dad," she said shyly, "I've been writing down some of your stories. I don't want them to disappear when—" Her voice broke, unable to finish the sentence. I smiled gently. "When I'm gone," I said, completing her thought. She nodded, tears in her eyes. "That's wise, sweetheart. Because stories are the greatest inheritance I can give you." From then on, every visit became a recording session. Sometimes with cameras, sometimes with just pens and paper, sometimes with nothing more than memory. My children and grandchildren would gather around, and I would tell them stories of my youth, of their mother, of the sacrifices made to keep food on the table, of the lessons I learned the hard way. They listened differently now. Not with the impatience of children who think they already know everything, but with the reverence of people who understood that time is precious, that every word from my lips was a treasure. One evening, my second son, always the practical one, said, "Dad, your YouTube channel is more than just videos. It's a movement. You've created something bigger than yourself. Maybe we should protect it, expand it, make sure it lasts beyond you." I chuckled. "Are you suggesting we turn this into a family project?" He shrugged, a little embarrassed. "Why not? You started it, but we can carry it forward. Your wisdom, your stories, they shouldn't die with you." That idea lit a spark. Soon, my children began brainstorming ways to contribute. One of my daughters suggested interviewing me about specific life lessons, parenting, perseverance, forgiveness. My eldest son offered to help with editing and managing the niche aspects of the channel, making it more accessible for future generations. Even the grandchildren wanted to join, offering to read letters from viewers or share their own reflections about what they were learning from Grandpa. And just like that, what began as one lonely man's cry into the void became a family mission. The change was remarkable. Where once they had ignored me, Now they worked alongside me. They stopped seeing me as a burden to be managed and started seeing me as the cornerstone of something that mattered. And I, in turn, stopped feeling like a forgotten relic and started feeling like a teacher again, a father again, a man whose life had meaning. But legacy isn't just about projects and platforms. It's about lessons carved into the hearts of those you love. And the greatest lesson I could teach was forgiveness. One night, as we sat together after filming, I looked around at my children and said, "Listen to me carefully. The world will tell you that success is measured in money, power, or recognition, but it's not. Success is measured in how you love and how you forgive. Because there will be times you feel betrayed, abandoned, even hated. But if you hold on to bitterness, it will eat you alive. The only way forward is forgiveness." They nodded, some with tears in their eyes, because they knew the truth of my words. They had lived it. They had seen how close we came to losing everything because forgiveness seemed too hard. My youngest daughter whispered, "Dad, I don't know how you forgave us. I don't think I could have, if the roles were reversed." I placed my hand on hers. "Sweetheart, forgiveness isn't something you do because the other person deserves it. You forgive because you deserve peace. And I wanted peace more than I wanted anger. Thanks for watching Budtenjur." Those words became a kind of family mantra. Whenever conflict arose, whenever old wounds threatened to reopen, someone would repeat them. And slowly, the fractures between us began to heal in ways I never thought possible. As months passed, I also began to think about what would happen when my time here was done. It wasn't a morbid thought, it was a practical one. I wanted to leave my children not with guilt, but with guidance. So I began writing letters, one for each child and one for each grandchild, letters filled with stories, advice, blessings, and love, letters they could open when they needed me most, long after I was gone. I didn't tell them about the letters, not yet. I wanted it to be a surprise, a final gift. At the same time, I found myself invited to speak virtually. Of course, at events, podcasts, even conferences about aging, forgiveness, and family. Me, an old man in a care facility, sharing my heart with the world. The irony wasn't lost on me. I, who once thought my life was over, was now helping others start anew. But the most powerful moments weren't public, they were private. Like when my eldest granddaughter asked me, "Grandpa, what's the most important thing I should remember when I grow up?" I thought for a moment, then said, "Remember that people are more important than things. Love is more important than pride. And time is more precious than money. Don't waste it chasing the wrong treasures." She smiled, hugging me tight. "I'll remember, Grandpa, I promise." And in that moment, I knew my legacy wasn't in what I owned. It wasn't in wealth or property or even accomplishments. My legacy was in the love I planted, the wisdom I passed down, the forgiveness that turned ashes into new growth. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, my 7 children gathered around me. We had spent the day filming, laughing, crying, sharing meals. Now, in the golden glow of twilight, I looked at them, each one scarred by life, but stronger for it. "You know," I said softly, "for a long time, I thought I had failed. I thought I had lost you forever. But now I see that nothing was wasted, even the pain, even the years of silence they led us here. To this moment, and if this is my legacy, then I couldn't ask for more." Tears filled their eyes. My eldest son reached out and squeezed my hand. "Dad," he whispered, "your legacy isn't just in us, it's in everyone you've touched, and we'll make sure it never dies." That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a peace deeper than I had ever known. My story, once filled with loneliness and betrayal, had become a story of redemption, of family reborn, of legacy redefined. And I knew, no matter how many days I had left, that I would leave this world not as a forgotten old man, but as a father, a grandfather, a storyteller, and above all a man who loved. There's a strange quiet that comes when you realize you're approaching the end of your road. not a silence of fear, but one of acceptance. It feels like standing at the edge of a wide ocean, watching the tide roll in, knowing it's time to let go and trust the waters to carry you. For me, that moment didn't come suddenly. It came gently, like the fading of daylight into twilight. My health was not what it used to be. My legs grew weaker, my breathing shorter, and my body tired quicker than ever before. The doctors told me what I already knew: time was slipping through my fingers. But instead of despair, I felt gratitude, because I had been given something far greater than extra years. I had been given reconciliation. I had been given my family back. The staff at the care facility noticed the change too. They said I looked lighter, more at peace, as if the years of burden had finally lifted. One nurse whispered to me one morning, "Mr. Thomas, it's like your heart has healed, even if your body hasn't." And I smiled, because she was right. In those days, my children visited me constantly. No more excuses about work, no more avoiding calls. They came with meals, laughter, and sometimes just to sit quietly beside me. My grandchildren brought drawings, stories from school, and endless hugs. The room that once felt like a prison now felt like the warmest home. One afternoon, as golden light streamed through the window, my eldest son leaned close and said, "Dad, do you ever regret forgiving us?" I looked into his eyes, the same eyes I had seen grow from a mischievous boy to a weary man, and shook my head. Never. Forgiveness was the only way forward. Without it, I would have died alone, bitter and broken. With it, I get to leave this world surrounded by love. Tell me, which sounds better? The Clyad. He swallowed hard and whispered, "You've taught us more than we deserve." But I didn't see it that way. I believed forgiveness wasn't about what someone deserved, it was about what you chose to give. And I chose peace. As the days passed, my children continued the work on our shared project, transforming my YouTube channel into something bigger than myself. They recorded hours of my stories, turning them into episodes that could inspire families across the world. They created playlists for lessons on forgiveness, resilience, and aging with dignity. They even invited viewers to send in their own stories, building a community where no elder would feel forgotten. Sometimes, I'd sit back and watch them work together. My 7 children, once divided, now united. It was the most beautiful sight I could imagine. "Dad," my youngest said one evening, "we're going to keep this going after you're gone. We'll make sure your voice keeps helping people. You'll never be forgotten." I reached out and cupped her face gently. "Don't do it for me. Do it for yourselves. Do it so you'll never forget what we've learned together, that love is stronger than pride, and forgiveness heals everything it touches." They promised me they would, and I believed them. But even as the days grew shorter, I felt there was still one more thing I needed to do. I needed to give them my final blessing. So one evening, I gathered all 7 children and every grandchild in my room. We ordered food, laughed, told stories, and filled the space with warmth. Then, when the time felt right, I cleared my throat and asked everyone to sit quietly. "I want you to listen carefully," I said, my voice trembling but strong. "You are my children. You are my greatest treasure. There were times I thought I had lost you, but now I see that nothing is ever truly lost when there is love. I forgive you. And I hope you forgive me too, for the times I failed, for the moments I wasn't enough. But more than that, I bless you. May you carry this love into your own families. May you never let pride come before compassion. And may you always, always choose each other." Tears streamed down their faces. Some sobbed openly. My grandchildren hugged me so tightly I thought they might never let go. And in that sacred moment, I knew my work here was complete. The final days passed softly. My children kept their promise. They stayed close. They filled the room with music, laughter, even prayers. They held my hands when my strength faded, whispered words of love when I drifted in and out of sleep. One night, my youngest granddaughter crawled into bed beside me and asked, "Grandpa, are you scared?" I smiled weakly. "Not anymore, sweetheart, because I'm not leaving alone. I'm leaving with all of you in my heart." She kissed my cheek and whispered, "I'll never forget you," and I believed her. When the end finally came, it was gentle, a soft exhale, a final smile, and then peace. But my story did not end there, because the day of my funeral was not a day of mourning, it was a day of celebration. Hundreds of people showed up, many I had never met, but who had been touched by my words online. They shared how my story gave them courage, how my forgiveness inspired them to reach out to estranged parents, siblings, even children. My children stood together, united, speaking not of my failures, but of my love. They spoke of how I taught them that legacy is not built in wealth or fame, but in the hearts you heal and the lives you touch. And as they lowered me into the earth, they promised out loud to carry on the mission, to ensure that no elder would ever feel abandoned, that every story would be told, and that forgiveness would never be forgotten. And so, even though my breath ended, my voice continued. Through my children, through my grandchildren, through the channel, through every person who heard my story and chose to forgive, I lived on. This was my final chapter, not a story of loss, but of redemption, not a tale of abandonment, but of return, not the end of a man, but the beginning of a legacy. And if you are listening to my story now, I ask you this: do not wait. Do not waste years in silence, in anger, in pride. Reach out, forgive, love, while there is still time. Because in the end, it won't matter how much you earned, or how many titles you held. What will matter is who held your hand when your time came, and who remembered you with love after you were gone. That is the real wealth. That is the true inheritance. And that is the story I leave behind.